The story begins in a dream when Takashi and his sister Cana were young. In the dream, Cana told him that she loved him and that she would marry him when they grew up. Then, he wakes up to the sound of his alarm clock and thinks to himself that it was a nostalgic dream. After coming out of his room, he sees his beautiful sister preparing for school. He greets her with a good morning, but she ignores him and walks away. Takashi sighs and thinks that she has changed so much from when they were young. They used to play together often, and she would even come to his bedroom because she wanted to sleep next to him. He remembers how cute she was back then, with a faint smile on his lips. Just then, Cana turns around and catches him staring at her. With an annoyed expression, she snaps, "What's with that look? Disgusting." Takashi feels a pang in his chest as he finishes his breakfast. He suddenly realizes that today is his 17th birthday and wonders if Cana remembers it. When she catches him glancing at her again, she asks, "What are you looking at?" But he just brushes it off and tells her, "Nothing." He can't help but think back to a few years ago when she would say a happy birthday and surprise him with a gift. But that was all in the past. He sighs again, thinking that this is just how people grow apart. Later that night, after dinner, his parents tell him that, since it's his 17th birthday, he should know something important and that Cana should hear it too. Both siblings are confused but don't question it. Takashi wonders if this is about them having a new family member, considering it's his 17th birthday and Cana is present too. However, his parents clarify that it's not about that since they're too old for another child. His father then tells them that it might be hard to accept, but it's the truth. Takashi is not their biological son, and he and Cana are not siblings by blood. Instead, they're engaged to be married. Takashi and Cana are both shocked and struggle to process what they've just heard. Their parents go on to explain that Takashi's biological parents died in a traffic accident, but miraculously, he survived. His adoptive parents had problems with their own families and became isolated. As close friends of Takashi's biological parents, they adopted him, and before his parents passed away, they promised to marry their daughter and son. In other words, Takashi and Cana were engaged from a very young age. After explaining everything, Takashi's father asks him to marry Cana, hoping to fulfill the promise he made to Takashi's biological parents. Still in shock, Takashi tries to oppose the idea, his voice shaky as he says, "Cana would obviously object, right?" But when he looks at her, she's blushing with an adorably shy expression. Embarrassed, Cana quickly runs away, leaving Takashi even more surprised by her reaction. His father tells him that the conversation is over and that he has a year to decide. Takashi retreats to his bedroom, his mind racing. He keeps thinking that Cana isn't his sister but his fiancée, and the revelation is so sudden that he doesn't know if it's real. He's always seen her as his sister, and it feels too late to view her as a romantic interest. The next day, after getting up and opening his door, Takashi sees Cana in a new set of clothes. Confused, he doesn't think much of it, but notices that she looks stunning. When he looks at her, she suddenly screams, "What?" But he just replies with, "Nothing," feeling a bit curious because she doesn't normally change clothes after breakfast. Blushing slightly, she tells him to leave her alone. During class, Cana keeps glancing at him, but when he asks her why, she shyly responds, "You must be imagining things." Takashi finds her behavior strange and thinks that he knows Cana better than this. He assumes she might be confused about yesterday's news and hopes she'll go back to normal soon. 5 days later, Takashi sits alone, thinking about everything that has happened. Cana hasn't gone back to her usual self. She now insists on using her own cup, despite using any cup until now, and tells him not to use the toilet right after she does, advising him to wait 10 minutes. It's as if she's treating him like a stranger. He wonders why her attitude has changed so much. Suddenly, it hits him, Cana has always ignored him, but does she treat their parents that way too? He hasn't seen proof, but she might, because their parents selfishly told her to be his fiancée. She might be deeply desperate. Takashi knows Cana better than anyone, even though she acts cold, she has a fragile personality. If this situation continues, there's only one outcome, she'll run away. Realizing this, he tells himself he must stop her. He quickly runs to her room, but when he enters, he sees her half-naked body as she's undressing. Flustered and embarrassed, Cana screams and loudly asks, "Why didn't you knock first?" Ignoring her question, Takashi taps her on the shoulder and says, "You must be shocked by the engagement, but please don't run away from home." Still confused, Cana asks, "What are you talking about?" He tells her she doesn't need to hide her feelings, but she insists that she's not planning on running away. Relieved but still concerned, he asks, "That's not it. You're really not going to run away?" She reassures him, then he asks her about her recent behavior. She questions him, asking if her behavior has changed. He tells her that she keeps glancing at him and why she changed clothes earlier than usual. Blushing slightly, Cana admits, "Because we're not blood-related anymore." She trails off, embarrassed, and walks away, leaving Takashi standing there, puzzled. As she sits on the couch later, looking at their childhood pictures, Cana whispers to herself, "He's an idiot." Her voice trembles with unspoken emotions, and she clutches the photo tightly. What emotions are hiding behind the word idiot? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The next day, after explaining everything to her friend, Cana felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Her friend, however, seemed more amused than concerned. "Even though you're really happy with the brother you love so much, you're still unhappy that he keeps treating you like a little sister?" Cana's eyes widened, and she quickly waved her hands in denial, her cheeks flushing. "That's not what I said. Besides, looking at him in a romantic way is impossible." Her friend raised an eyebrow, smirking. "But you were super clingy with him when you were younger." Cana looked away, her heart fluttering with a confusing mix of emotions. "That was when we were kids. It's normal at that age." Her friend leaned in closer, her voice teasing. "You talked about him non-stop until 7th grade. That's why I know so much about him. No one else liked their brother that much at that age." Cana's face turned a deeper shade of red, her hands clenching nervously. "I don't like him that way." Her friend chuckled, clearly enjoying this. "Then just act normally." Cana's expression turned frustrated, her brows knitting together. "It's like I'm aware of him, but he's completely unaware of me. And that just pisses me off." Her friend's eye sparkled with mischief. "So you are aware of Takashi?" Cana hesitated, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her skirt as she avoided her friend's gaze. "Just a little, when I found out we weren't related. But like I said, I'm not in love with him." Her friend burst out laughing, clearly entertained by Cana's reactions. "You're so easy to read. Why don't you try something to make him aware of you? Like walking in on him while he's taking a shower and asking him to wash your back." Cana's face turned beet red, and she nearly jumped out of her seat. "Like hell I will." Her friend kept laughing, the teasing relentless. "Or maybe wear a short skirt so you could accidentally show him your panties?" Cana shook her head vehemently, her hands covering her burning cheeks. "I can't do that. I'm not a slut." Her friend grinned, enjoying the banter. "What about holding hands? Leaning on his shoulder?" Cana sighed deeply, feeling overwhelmed. "I can't do that either. Making him notice me seems impossible." Her friend placed a comforting hand on Cana's shoulder, her tone softening. "Just give it a try. You might be surprised." Cana was frustrated at first, but after a while, she reluctantly agreed, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. Back at home, Takashi was walking down the stairs when he noticed Cana staring at him, her gaze oddly intense. He paused, raising an eyebrow in confusion. Cana realized she had been caught and blurted out, "I never noticed before, but you're more muscular than I thought." Her eyes widened in shock at her own words, her face instantly flushing. Without thinking, she turned and fled, leaving Takashi bewildered. Later, while Takashi was sitting on the couch, Cana quietly sat beside him. He noticed that she usually kept her distance, but this time she was inching closer, bit by bit. His confusion grew as she continued to move closer. As she slid even closer, Takashi began to wonder if her shoulder was sore. After a moment of hesitation, he stood up, walked behind her, and gently began massaging her shoulders. Cana, completely caught off guard, quickly pulled away, her face bright red. "What are you doing?" Takashi blinked, surprised by her reaction. "Isn't your shoulder stiff? I thought I'd help you out." Cana shook her head, her embarrassment palpable. "No, it's not." Takashi tilted his head, still confused. "Then why were you acting so weird just now?" Cana's face was burning with embarrassment, her mind racing. She couldn't find the words to explain, so she did the only thing she could think of: she ran away. An hour or two later, Takashi was getting ready for bed when Cana quietly came out of her room, thinking he was already asleep. But as she approached, she noticed a bug near her and let out a terrified scream, jumping to his side and clutching his arm tightly, pressing it against her chest. Takashi looked down at her, his heart skipping a beat as he saw her beautiful, flushed face so close to his. "What happened?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the sudden rush of emotions. Cana pointed with a trembling hand, her voice quivering. "Look at that!" He followed her gaze and saw the cockroach. "It's just a cockroach," he said, trying to calm her down. Cana, still clinging to him, shook her head desperately. "I can't sleep with something like that in the house." Takashi sighed, gently patting her head. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." He quickly sprayed the cockroach and threw it outside. "It's safe now," he reassured her, his voice soft. Cana sighed in relief, slowly loosening her grip on his arm. "You're so weird, staying calm with something so disgusting." Takashi chuckled softly. "What did you want to say before this?" Cana struggled to find her voice, her cheeks still burning with embarrassment. "It's nothing." "Good night," she mumbled, retreating quickly to her room. As he lay in bed, Takashi couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. "She's grown more than I thought," he muttered to himself, shaking his head as if to clear his thoughts. "Why am I thinking like this about my own sister?" Meanwhile, in her room, Cana lay in bed, clenching her fists in determination. In the end, nothing happened, and the trick didn't work, she whispered to herself. "I should just give up on trying to make him notice me." But as she thought about her brother, her resolve strengthened. "No, I can't accept that. It might seem impossible now, but someday, I'll make him fall for me." The next day, after school, Takashi came back home and saw Cana sitting on the couch, looking unusually upset. During dinner, she barely touched her food before abruptly getting up and leaving the table. Takashi found it strange and, concerned, asked their mom if something had happened to Cana. His mother sighed and explained. Cana said her test scores were worse than usual. Worry crept into Takashi's mind. At this rate, she won't advance to high school and might become a shut-in, he thought. He knew he couldn't overlook this as her big brother. Determined to help, he walked to her room, knocked on the door, and gently asked, "Cana, do you have a minute?" Cana opened the door, her expression guarded. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to sound indifferent. "I heard your test scores weren't great," Takashi said, his voice soft with concern. Cana's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "How did you know that?" "Mom told me." "I'm worried you'll turn into a shut-in if you keep failing your exams," he admitted, his tone light but with an underlying seriousness. "I want to help you study. After all, I remember you said your school of choice is the same as mine." Cana looked down, fidgeting with her hands. "Studying together is better than studying alone, but are you sure you're okay with it?" she asked, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. "Of course," Takashi replied with a warm smile. "It's for my lovely little sister, after all." Cana's blush deepened, caught off guard by his affectionate words. She quickly turned away, trying to hide her flustered expression. Just wait a second. My room is a bit messy," she said, blocking the doorway. Takashi chuckled softly. "I don't mind if it's messy." But inside her room, Cana hurriedly tied it up, shoving things into drawers and straightening out everything, including a cherished photo of them together. Once she was satisfied, she called out, "Okay, you can come in now." Takashi opened the door to find the room spotless. Cana was sitting on the bed, looking both nervous and expectant. As he looked around, his eyes landed on a stuffed bear, one that he had given her years ago. It warmed his heart to see that she still had it. Cana noticed him staring and immediately scowled. "Stop looking around like that," she snapped, her annoyance barely masking her embarrassment. Takashi smiled apologetically. Sorry. So, I heard your test scores were bad, but what did you specifically get?" She handed him the test papers, and he skimmed through them. "These aren't too bad," he began, but then Cana pointed at her math score, her face falling. "Look at my math score," she muttered. Takashi's eyebrows shot up when he saw the 55. "Not a fan of equations, huh?" Cana sighed in frustration. "I really don't like them." "Well," Takashi said thoughtfully, "since you already know your weak points, let's come up with a method to compensate for them. You can manage if you prepare properly." He moved closer to her, their shoulders almost touching, as he started to explain the problems. As he leaned in, Cana's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she found herself unable to concentrate on his words. Her eyes flickered nervously to his face, so close to hers. She froze, barely registering what he was saying. Takashi noticed her dazed expression and gently tapped the desk. "Cana, concentrate. I'm doing this for your sake, you know." Cana mumbled under her breath, her cheeks flushing even more. "Of course I know. Whose fault do you think it is for leaning so close?" "What did you say?" Takashi asked, raising an eyebrow. Nothing." Cana stammered, quickly looking down at her workbook. After a few more minutes, she finally managed to focus on the problems. As they worked through the equations together, she began to relax, a small, content smile playing on her lips. When they finally finished, she let out a sigh of relief, her smile widening as she looked at the completed work. Takashi, watching her closely, felt his heart skip a beat. It had been so long since he'd seen her smile like that up close. Before he could think, his hand moved to her head, gently patting her, his fingers stroking her hair. Cana's eyes fluttered shut, her expression melting into one of quiet enjoyment. But then, as she realized what was happening, her eyes snapped open, and her face turned crimson. She quickly slapped his hand away, embarrassed beyond words. What are you doing?" she stammered, trying to regain her composure. Takashi chuckled softly. "You looked happy, so I thought you might like it." No, I wasn't. Just focus on studying," she huffed, turning her face away to hide her flustered expression. After they finished their study session, Cana quietly thanked him, still avoiding eye contact. "Thanks for teaching me," she mumbled. Takashi smiled warmly, standing up to leave. "No problem. Good luck with your studies. I'll be going now. Good night." As he turned to leave, Cana's heart sank slightly, a pang of sadness washing over her. "I don't want him to go yet," she thought, feeling oddly empty as he walked away. But then, he suddenly turned back, walking toward her with a determined look. Cana's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. Is he going to? Her face turned bright red as she imagined him patting her head again. But instead, he simply reached for his pen on the table, giving her a quick smile. "Almost forgot this," he said, holding up the pen. "Good night, Cana." And with that, he left, leaving Cana sitting there, her face still flushed, a mix of disappointment and annoyance bubbling inside her. "It's enough already," she muttered to herself, feeling the frustration of her unfulfilled hopes. The next day, Takashi noticed Cana acting suspiciously. Her face seemed a bit off, as if something was bothering her. Concerned, he asked, "Cana, did you just watch a horror movie? Your face looks pale." Surprised, Cana quickly denied it, but Takashi wasn't convinced. "You always look like this after watching a horror movie. You're even trembling a little. The sofa's shaking too, you know." "Shut up!" Cana snapped, trying to cover up her embarrassment. Just then, a piece of paper fell from her bag. Takashi bent down to pick it up, and as he looked at it, his suspicions were confirmed. A ghost movie, hey? He asked, holding up the ticket stub. Realizing she couldn't deny it any longer, Cana sighed and explained, yeah, it was about this female ghost spirit who committed suicide and now haunts a school. But it's just a cliché horror movie. I already knew how the story would go, so it wasn't scary at all. I'm not trembling or scared, okay? Takashi, having had enough of her bravado, decided to tease her. Oh, really? Then who's that woman's face in the window? Cana's eyes widened in sheer terror as she instinctively jumped into his arms, grabbing onto him tightly. Her entire body trembled with fear as she clung to him, her face buried against his chest. Takashi blushed, feeling her warmth and the rapid beat of her heart against him. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft and apologetic. Hey, I'm sorry. That was just a joke. I didn't think you'd be so scared. Realizing she'd fallen for his prank, Cana's fear quickly turned to anger. She grabbed a pillow from the couch and smacked him in the face. Don't joke around like that, idiot, she fumed, her cheeks still flushed from the scare. Takashi laughed, holding up his hands in surrender. Okay, I won't do it again. But seriously, if you get this scared and start trembling after watching a horror movie, why do you watch them? That's none of your business. Cana snapped, still embarrassed by how easily she had been scared. Takashi's expression softened as he said, you don't have to hide it from me, you know. I bet your friends bullied you into watching it, didn't they? They did not. Cana shot back, annoyed by his assumption. I wasn't bullied. I was just invited by my friends, and I couldn't refuse. Just as I thought, Takashi said, nodding to himself. You got bullied by your friends. Cana's annoyance turned to anger. I hate it when you treat me like a child just because I can't handle scary movies. Takashi suddenly remembered their parents were going on a trip that night. He looked at her with concern. Are you going to be okay sleeping alone tonight? Cana hesitated, a hint of uncertainty in her voice as she replied, maybe. I think I can manage. Seeing through her uncertainty, Takashi smiled and said, then maybe it can't be helped. Do you want to sleep with me tonight? Cana's face turned bright red as she stared at him in shock. What did you just say? Takashi chuckled at her reaction. We used to sleep together all the time when we were little. That was when we were kids. Cana protested, still flustered. I'm not a child anymore. I can sleep alone just fine. Later that night, as Takashi lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about Cana. I wonder if she's really okay. Feeling restless, he got up and went to check on her. As he expected, Cana was still sitting on the sofa, clearly too scared to go to her room. It's already bedtime. You should go to sleep, he said gently. Cana looked up at him, her voice a little defensive. What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in your room? Takashi smiled softly as he sat down next to her on the sofa. Am I not allowed to come to the living room? He noticed how tightly her hands were clenched around the sofa cushion. Without thinking, he reached out and held her hand, feeling how cold and trembling it was. Your hand is a bit cold. Mind if I use your blanket too? Cana hesitated for a moment before nodding, sharing the blanket with him as they sat quietly together. Takashi, feeling the warmth between them, said softly, you should stop being scared so easily. You always used to come to my room after watching scary movies or TV shows, asking to sleep with me. Don't remind me of those embarrassing things. Cana said, her face turning red. Takashi chuckled, a fond look in his eyes. You were really cute when you did that. Cana's heart skipped a beat at his words, and she hesitated before asking, what about now? Am I still cute? Takashi was taken aback by the sudden question. He looked at her, taking in her adorable face, her wide eyes filled with a mix of hope and anxiety. Shyly, he answered, yeah, you're still cute. Cana's face lit up with happiness, and she smiled at him, her gaze filled with affection. Takashi, feeling the intensity of the moment, continued, "Actually, now you're even," but he quickly caught himself, shaking his head as he mumbled, "Never mind. It's nothing. What was I about to say?" he thought, shaken by the emotion stirring inside him. That was dangerous. He quickly stood up, trying to break the tension. "Come on, let's get to sleep." The next morning, Takashi woke up to find Cana lying on top of him, her arms wrapped around him as she mumbled in her sleep, "I'm your wife." Their faces were so close together that he could feel her breath on his skin. Takashi's heart pounded as he looked at her peaceful expression. What kind of dream is she having? He wondered, feeling a mix of confusion and affection. Gently, he tried to wake her. "Cana, wake up." Cana slowly opened her eyes, still groggy, but when she realized the position she was in, her face turned beet red. What are you doing, you pervert?" she screamed, choking his neck in embarrassment. Hey! You're the one who's on top of me," Takashi yelled, struggling to breathe. "At least you're not scared anymore." Cana huffed, quickly letting go and standing up. "I wasn't scared to begin with," she snapped, turning on her heel and walking away, her face still burning with embarrassment. Takashi sighed, lying back on the bed as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. His heart was still racing, and he couldn't help but wonder, why is my heart beating so fast? If things keep going like this, what if I didn't stop? But he quickly dismissed the thought, shaking his head. "I must just be tired. I need more sleep," he told himself, closing his eyes and forcing himself to relax. During breakfast the next morning, Takashi's mother gave him a knowing look. "So, any progress with you and Cana?" she asked, a teasing smile playing on her lips. Takashi nearly choked on his food. What? There's no way there'd be anything like that," he stammered, his face turning red. "Why not?" his mother pressed, tilting her head slightly. "Cana is beautiful, just like me. You shouldn't have any complaints." Takashi sighed, rolling his eyes as he tried to ignore the self-compliment hidden in her words. "It doesn't matter how she looks. She's my little sister." His mother's smile widened mischievously. "But you two aren't technically related by blood, so legally, you could get married." "That's not the point." Takashi snapped, his frustration growing. "I don't have any intention of marrying Cana. Even if we're not blood related, she's still my sister." With that, he stood up abruptly and walked away, his irritation palpable. His mother watched him go, a thoughtful expression on her face. Their progress isn't going as well as I'd hoped," she mused to herself. Then, an idea struck her, and she smiled. A little later, she knocked on Takashi's door. When he opened it, she handed him a ticket with a grin. Takashi's eyes widened in shock. Is this a ticket to Dream Island? But then he froze, realization dawning on him. Dream Island was where they'd been holding the Mitsukai events lately, events meant for couples. He had wanted to go but didn't have the money. And besides, it was for couples only. His mother's voice interrupted his thoughts. "You can't go alone, so why don't you ask Cana to go with you?" Takashi blinked, trying to process her suggestion. Is she really trying to set me up on a date with Cana? He wondered. And how does she even know what anime I like? Before leaving, his mother added cheerfully, "Oh, and Cana loves amusement parks too. She'll definitely want to go." After she left, Takashi stared at the ticket in his hand, feeling conflicted. He wanted to go to the event, but asking Cana out seemed awkward. He didn't have any female friends he could invite, though. After a moment of hesitation, he decided to go for it. There's nothing to be worried about. Going to an amusement park with my sister isn't weird, he reasoned. It's weirder to be so self-conscious about it. He walked to Cana's room and knocked on the door. When she opened it, she looked at him curiously. What is it? Takashi hesitated, then showed her the ticket. Mom gave me this Dream Island ticket. Do you want to go with me? Cana's eyes lit up with excitement. Dream Island? Really? Can we ride the roller coaster there? I'd love to go. But then, her excitement wavered as she thought about it. Wait, isn't the ticket only for a boy and girl pair? Isn't it supposed to be for couples? Takashi shrugged, trying to play it cool. Yeah, normally. But there's no problem if we go. It's not like we're breaking any rules. Cana thought for a moment, then smiled brightly. All right, I'm in. At Dream Island, Cana's eyes sparkled with excitement as she ran around, taking in all the sights. Look, Takashi! Isn't that so cute? Takashi chuckled, watching her with amusement. You're always excited when you see something cute like that. She pouted slightly, trying to downplay her enthusiasm. I'm not that excited. As they walked around, Takashi noticed how crowded the park was. Cana, do you want to hold hands so we don't get separated? He asked, a little nervous. Cana's face flushed with embarrassment. I guess we have no choice, she mumbled, reaching out to hold his hand. Both of them felt shy and avoided looking at each other's faces as they walked together, their hands clasped. Takashi's mind raced. I just spontaneously held hands with her. Is this okay? But then he reassured himself, it's just a normal thing. We used to do it all the time. Suddenly, two of Cana's friends spotted her. The siblings quickly let go of each other's hands as the girls approached. Is that really you, Cana? One of her friends asked, her eyes widening. Is he your boyfriend? Are we interrupting something? Cana quickly shook her head, flustered. No, no. He's my brother. One of her friends looked between them, unconvinced. You two don't look alike at all. You must be really close to hold hands like that, she teased. After the girls said their goodbyes and left, Takashi sighed. Since we don't look alike, maybe we shouldn't hold hands to avoid any misunderstandings. Cana hesitated, then gathered her courage. She grabbed his hand again, her grip firm. We'll clear up any misunderstandings later, she said softly, her cheeks tinged pink. After walking around for a bit, they arrived at the roller coaster. Cana's excitement returned. Let's ride it, Takashi. Takashi looked at the long line and hesitated. It's pretty crowded. Maybe we should try something else first. But Cana refused to budge. I want to ride the roller coaster. Seeing her determination, Takashi sighed. There are other fun things to do, you know. Cana suddenly grinned, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Wait, are you scared of roller coasters? Takashi's expression gave him away, and Cana couldn't help but tease him. Even if you're scared, it's okay. It's a little pathetic, but we can go somewhere else. Annoyed by her teasing, Takashi snapped, I'm not scared. I got over it a long time ago. During the ride, Cana laughed and enjoyed herself, while Takashi screamed at the top of his lungs. Afterward, Takashi sat on a bench, looking gloomy. Cana, still smiling from the ride, teased him gently. As I thought, you couldn't handle it. I'm fine, he insisted, though his expression betrayed him. Something like that is no big deal. Cana giggled. No matter how you look at it, that's a lie. Let's just keep going, Takashi muttered, trying to change the subject. They headed to a place called the terrifying Abyssal Maze. Takashi glanced at the entrance, a haunted house that looked genuinely creepy. Maybe this is a bit much for you. You might end up peeing your pants in fear. Cana huffed, crossing her arms. I won't. Stuff like this is child's play. It's a piece of cake. But once they entered, Takashi's suspicions were confirmed. As soon as the ghost and zombies appeared, Cana clung to him tightly, her fear evident. Takashi felt a strange mix of emotions as she held onto him. Cana, stop clinging to me so much, he said, his voice a little shaky. But then, a ghost suddenly jumped out, scaring Cana so much that she leaped onto him, her chest pressing against his face. Takashi's face turned bright red, his heart racing as he struggled to stay calm. After they exited the haunted house, Cana looked embarrassed. I didn't think it would be that scary. Takashi, still flustered, tried to recover. Even if you say that, I think I was more scared than you, he muttered, though his thoughts kept drifting back to the moment she had jumped on him. Noticing her mood, Takashi suggested, let's get some ice cream. Cana nodded, her face still a little red from the scare. They bought a chocolate and vanilla ice cream, and as Cana admired the taste, she asked, can we switch? I want the chocolate. Sure, Takashi agreed, holding out his ice cream to her. But as they moved to switch, they both paused, realizing what they were doing could be considered an indirect kiss. They quickly brushed off the thought, both feeling a little embarrassed. It's nothing weird, Takashi reassured himself, remembering that they had done this kind of thing when they were younger. But seeing Cana's face blush slightly as she watched him eat, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. Hurry and eat it, Takashi urged, trying to cover up his own flustered feelings. After finishing the ice cream, Takashi suggested they head back. But then he remembered the event he had completely forgotten about. What the hell was I doing? As they walked, Cana looked back at him with a bright, happy smile. Today was so much fun. Takashi felt a genuine smile spread across his face as he replied, yeah, it really was. After they arrived home, Takashi heard some noises coming from the storage room. Curious, he called out, Cana, are you looking for something in there? Cana, her voice slightly muffled, replied, yeah, I'm trying to find a novel my friend wants to read, but I can't find it anywhere. Takashi peeked into the cluttered room, raising an eyebrow. It's pretty messy in here. It might be hard to find anything. Cana turned to him, a hopeful look in her eyes. Can you help me find it? He hesitated, then shook his head. Sorry, I have to study. As he started to leave, Cana suddenly gasped in excitement. Oh. I found this book called Rage of the Dragon Knight. Takashi's heart skipped a beat, and before she could react, he quickly snatched the book from her hands. What's this? Cana asked, puzzled by his sudden action. It's nothing, Takashi replied hastily, his voice a little too tight. Just forget about it. I thought I threw this away already, he thought, feeling a surge of panic. Are there more of these lying around? He suddenly changed his mind. Actually, I'll help you find the novel. Cana looked at him, confused by his abrupt offer, but didn't question it. All right. The title is Piano Above the Clouds. Takashi frowned in thought. I don't remember reading that. Are you sure it's in the house? Dad said it's here somewhere, Cana replied, rummaging through a pile of books. As they searched, Takashi picked up an old book and flipped through it absent-mindedly. His breath caught when he found pictures of his younger self inside. Cana noticed his distraction and walked over. What are you looking at? Hurry up and help me find the book. Takashi smiled faintly. I found an album. Cana's curiosity piqued, and she came closer to see. Together, they looked at the photos of their childhood, hugging, playing, even sleeping together. Cana's cheeks turned pink as she remembered those times, feeling a mix of nostalgia and embarrassment. Takashi flipped to another page and froze. There was a picture of Cana kissing him on the cheek. Both of them blushed deeply, their hearts racing. Cana let out a squeal of embarrassment. Ah! Don't look at that! Takashi quickly tried to cover his flustered state. We were just kids, he said, but Cana, her face still burning, quickly explained. I used to see people do that all the time in dramas. I was just imitating them. Takashi chuckled softly, trying to ease the tension. But as they continued flipping through the album, he noticed something strange. After a few more pages, there were no more pictures of them together. His expression grew somber. What happened back then? He wondered, a vague sadness tugging at his heart. Maybe something changed when I was in 8th grade. She started distancing herself from me. It's so nostalgic, Takashi murmured, his eyes lingering on the empty pages. But it's kind of sad that there are no more pictures of us together after that. He turned to Cana, a small, wistful smile on his face. Why don't we take a picture now? Cana looked at him, surprised by his sudden suggestion. What's with you all of a sudden? We're not taking a picture unless it's a special occasion. Takashi nodded, agreeing with her. You're right. Cana's face faltered, feeling a bit annoyed by his easy acceptance. She huffed and said, if you really insist on taking a picture, then let's take one. I'm not insisting, Takashi said, a bit confused by her reaction. But Cana, her frustration growing, snapped, it's okay. Just take the picture already. Startled by her sudden outburst, Takashi quickly took out his phone. They posed together, and he took a few good photos. After they were done, Takashi looked at the pictures with a satisfied smile. These turned out pretty good. Cana, still a little flustered, nodded. Send them to my phone too. Later, when Cana received the photos, she secretly set one as her wallpaper. She looked at it with affection, her heart fluttering slightly. What are you doing? Takashi's voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. Cana jumped, nearly dropping her phone. She quickly hid it from him. It's nothing. Takashi raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You seem flustered. I'm not. Cana insisted, her voice a little too defensive. Trying to change the subject, she reminded him, we still need to find that novel. Where could it be? As they continued searching, Takashi's gaze fell on a piece of paper. Curious, he picked it up and started reading it aloud. My beloved Oni-chan. Cana's eyes widened in horror. She lunged toward him, trying to snatch the paper from his hand. Don't read that. Takashi held the paper high, out of her reach, laughing as he continued reading. The coolest guy in the world. Well, this is embarrassing. Cana's face turned bright red. Give it back. And why are you embarrassed? She kept trying to grab the paper, her frustration growing with each failed attempt. In the struggle, they both lost their balance and fell to the ground, Cana landing on top of Takashi. They froze, faces just inches apart, their breaths mingling. The world seemed to stop for a moment as they stared into each other's eyes, both of them blushing furiously. Takashi quickly apologized, his voice shaky. Sorry about the teasing. Let's just keep looking for the novel. Cana, her heart still pounding, nodded and got off him, trying to compose herself. After a bit more searching, she finally found the novel. Here it is, she exclaimed, holding it up triumphantly. Takashi smiled, relieved. Good job. I'll do anything for my little sister. Cana's heart skipped a beat at his words, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. But she quickly masked her emotions with a teasing smirk. First, you refused to help. Were you just trying to hide that weird story you wrote? Takashi's face flushed slightly as he tried to defend himself. That was just something I did to pass the time. I don't even write anymore. Cana chuckled, finding his embarrassment endearing. Sure. But honestly, I thought it was charming in its own way. Takashi blinked, surprised. Did you say something? Cana quickly shook her head, startled by his question. Nothing. Now that we've found the novel, let's get out of here. As they prepared to leave, Takashi noticed something on a nearby shelf. A picture frame caught his eye, and he walked over to examine it. His expression softened when he saw the photo inside. It was a picture of his real parents. Cana joined him, looking at the photo. They really do look like you, she commented quietly. Takashi didn't respond. He carefully placed the frame back on the shelf and turned to Cana, his expression unreadable. Let's go. Seeing the strange look on his face, Cana felt a pang of concern but didn't know what to say. Her thoughts swirling with questions she couldn't bring herself to ask. At school, Cana confided in her friend about what had happened with her brother. Her friend listened carefully, then offered a thoughtful look. It sounds like a complicated issue. Yeah, Cana agreed, a hint of worry in her voice. Is there any way to cheer him up? Her friend pondered for a moment. There are feelings that only the person affected can really understand. But you could try cooking something for him. Guys usually appreciate a home-cooked meal from a girl. Cana still had doubts. Do you really think that'll work? Her friend gave a sly grin, as if a mischievous idea had just crossed her mind. Maybe you should cook for him wearing nothing but an apron. That'll definitely get his attention. Cana's cheeks flared red, and she quickly brushed off the suggestion. No way. Her friend laughed but persisted, I'm serious. Cooking for him is a good idea. It's a way to show you care, even if you're just siblings. It might even help you get your feelings across. Cana hesitated but then nodded thoughtfully. You have a point. Her friend, observing Cana's expression, thought to herself, so she doesn't deny that she loves her brother. Suddenly, Cana remembered the time Takashi had given her a bag of cookies when she was feeling down. She smiled at the memory and decided, I'll make cookies for him. Thanks for the idea. A few days later, while Takashi was absorbed in his video game, he heard a knock on his door. Surprised, he paused the game and went to open it. Cana? What's up? Cana stood there, looking a bit nervous, and wearing an apron. Do you have a second? Takashi raised an eyebrow. This is rare. Why are you wearing an apron? She seemed flustered by his question but led him to the kitchen anyway, where a plate of cookies was waiting on the table. What's up with this? He asked, confused. What do you mean? She replied, trying to sound casual. I made them. It's for one of my friend's birthdays, but I don't know much about baking, so I need your help to eat them. Takashi narrowed his eyes slightly, knowing she was lying. He thought back to 5 years ago when she had come home looking upset. She had a fight with her friend and thought they'd never make up, he recalled. To comfort her, he had made her favorite, cookies, hoping to cheer her up. Eat these, he had told her back then. You'll feel better. Don't worry, if you apologize, you two will make up right away. Her smile had returned that day, brightening his world. And now, she's doing the same for me, he realized, touched by her effort. As he stood there, lost in thought, Cana nudged him gently. Hey, let's eat them together. Takashi snapped out of his reverie and nodded. He picked up a cookie and took a bite. Instantly, his eyes widened, and he nearly choked. The cookie was incredibly spicy, sending a jolt through his taste buds. Did she get the ingredients wrong? He wondered, grimacing. Then, a memory flashed in his mind. When I made cookies for her back then, I accidentally used Tabasco instead of flavor extract. This tastes exactly like that. He couldn't help but laugh at the strange coincidence. Cana, puzzled by his reaction, asked, What's so funny? Takashi managed to speak between chuckles. You put the wrong ingredient in it. It's super spicy. Cana's eyes widened in horror and she quickly grabbed a cookie, biting into it to see for herself. Her face scrunched up in shock. Oh no. It's really spicy. I'll make them again. But Takashi shook his head, still smiling. No need. Just eat them as they are. He took another bite, savoring the strange nostalgia that came with the spicy flavor. It actually tastes pretty good, in its own way. After they had finished eating, Takashi wiped his brow. Wow, that was really spicy. I'm thirsty now. Cana quickly filled 2 cups of water and brought them over, but as she was walking back to him, she suddenly slipped. The water splashed all over Takashi, soaking his shirt. Oh no! Cana gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Takashi sighed and began to take off his wet shirt. Cana's face turned bright red as she watched, her heart skipping a beat. Why are you stripping? It feels weird when it's wet, Takashi replied, nonchalant. Cana, flustered, waved her hands. Don't do it here in the kitchen. But Takashi just chuckled, clearly amused. What's the big deal? We used to bathe together when we were kids. That has nothing to do with anything now. Cana shot back, her blush deepening. Takashi smiled at her reaction, his tone softening. Thanks for the cookies, Cana. I really appreciate it. Cana's heart fluttered at his gratitude, but she quickly tried to downplay her feelings. I didn't make them for you, you know. He looked at her seriously, his expression thoughtful. After seeing that photo of our real parents, it really hit me that we're not blood related. But if we still share the same memories, we're still family. I have so many memories of us and our parents. That's what matters. Cana's eyes softened, touched by his words. Her voice came out shyly as she replied, there's still another way to become family, you know.